Hello, everyone, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Alyssa Harris. I'm a vocalist, vocal coach, just coming on here with some insight information for all my fellow singers and performers out there. So today is going to be kind of a podcast style, voiceover style, and I wanted to talk a little bit about the horrible band leader experiences that I've had in my career as a professional singer and vocalist. And throughout the years of just performing, I've been really lucky to work with great groups, but I've also have had the unfortunate experience of working with some less than ideal managers or less than ideal supervisors, leaders, directors. A lot of people deal with horrible bosses. There's even there's even a movie about it. Okay, there's two movies about it. We can all sort of have that universal experience of working with someone in management or authority that abuses their power, that that isn't a good leader, that isn't a team player, that is mean, that is toxic, that is a liar, that is unfair. The list goes on and on. And I think, in the arena of making music, of performing, corporate entertainment, that's no different. And it is unfortunate because there's so many aspects of the job that are so much fun and so carefree. And, whenever there's just someone, just a negative wet blanket that just comes and just ruins the party with their, horrible management skills, it just kind of just makes it worse. And like I said, I haven't had too many experiences with this, thankfully, but the ones that I have had, while horrible, I feel like they really shaped me into the person and into the performer that I am today. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. I really thought in the moment that this was going to break me. This was going to be my failing point, that this was, I wasn't going to be able to bounce back from, the damage or the trauma or the pressure that I went through in these experiences. But now on the other side of it, I can look back and I can say, wow, I went through that. I handled it this way. Maybe I should have done this differently. Maybe I should have done that differently. But, I triumphed and I made it through and I became stronger. Like I said, a better performer, more mentally strong, more street smart, and just overall more dynamic and more resilient. So in the end, it ended up benefiting me in a strange way, in a roundabout way. And, I'm just glad that I'm able to tell the story from the other side because I've done well for myself. I would call myself successful, and those, handful of bad experiences didn't hinder me from, moving on and moving up in my career and still becoming, a great performer and having good experiences. So that's why I feel comfortable with sharing this with you guys today. And I also want it to be something that is relatable, that maybe I hope you haven't had to deal with this horrible stuff, but if you have, it's something that you can relate to for sure, and something that, you're not alone. I've dealt with it and I've come out on top on the other side. And so you can too. And so as I'm going through this, maybe as I'm going through these stories, maybe you can call back to memory some of the things that may have happened to you in the past. And hopefully this is a healing experience, because writing this out and thinking about it and being able to retell this story kind of has been a healing process for me a little bit too. So I'm glad to be able to share it with you and kind of close the chapter on the past and the hurts from the past. So when that movie first came out, you guys, Horrible Bosses, I remember laughing because it was during that same time that I had a horrible boss, and I was like, I can relate. I think everyone, like I said, no matter what profession that you're in, you've had to deal with a boss that is a real asshole. And I definitely have. These were the bosses that were, not to be dramatic, like the origin of some of my traumas that still stick with me to this day, that I have just now worked through or am working through. So in the arena of corporate entertainment, you don't exactly have a quote unquote boss per se. You have what I like to call an elevated peer, because as a contractor, you're pretty much much your own boss. No one can exactly hire or fire you. They can terminate your contract, but you're hired off of your skills, and that's typically based on a one-off event or series, or like a one-off set of occurrences, so like a cruise ship, right? Cruise ship contract. So there's a chain of command, but that's not something that you're usually adhering to or privy to, if that makes sense. Instead, you answer to sort of like a direct supervisor who in a lot of cases ends up being your band leader. And in my cases, they were my band leaders. So they were in the band with me. So before I really knew anything or how things really worked, I used to think that, okay, the band leader is the boss, the end all be all, and I have to kiss their ass. And that's because I didn't realize, the power that I had within as a vocalist and as a performer. That's, a whole other story. I could definitely go into detail about that. But, I was seeing the power and seeing the authority as outside of myself, right? But again, I was so young, I was just starting out, and I didn't have much experience to base this off of, base the experience off of. So I kind of went along with it because I was so, for lack of a better word, like desperate to just have finally, gotten the opportunity, that I would have let anything slide in order to not make waves or rock the boat. I had been applying over and over again to cruise ship jobs with no avail, and after months and months of submitting, getting a job on a cruise ship was like one of my life's dreams realized. So I know it sounds funny, like now, silly, but at the time it was like the biggest accomplishment I could have ever imagined, and it was something I'd always wanted to do. So when I finally got it, I was like, I can't mess this up. Every step of the way I thought to myself, this is it. I don't want to do any possible thing that could jeopardize my opportunities. And now, of course, I look back and I realize I didn't need to put up with the abuse that I did from anyone to have a job that I really cared about. But again, I was very young and just didn't know any better. So I think we should start all the way from the beginning of my first instance that I want to share with you guys today, where I had a horrible boss. So I had just gotten my first job as a singer with a cruise line, and I'd gotten the job as a show band singer, which is basically the leading front woman singer role at the front of a 10-piece band. And of course, I was absolutely ecstatic when I got the news that I was going to be doing that job, especially because I learned that I would be working with one of the biggest bands in the entire fleet of ships. Specifically, that band, it consisted of a rhythm section plus 6 horns, and I also had 2 female musicians, which was awesome and very rare, and hadn't happened for me very much, at the time, and at all, pretty much. So of course I was really excited, and about 2 months out from when I was supposed to be leaving, I got an email from our band leader that was going to be on the ship with me. Now, remember, I'm brand new to this. I have no idea what to expect, and I don't know the protocol for how much a band leader is supposed to contact you before the gig actually starts. And I'm completely and totally green to this world and to this type of work. Because remember, at this point in my career, I had done some local work, a few singing jobs here and there, but this was the first real corporate job that I ever did. So everything was new to me, and I didn't know what was considered normal. So I'd say about a month out from when I started, I would start getting emails from this guy. Okay, 1 or 2 here and there about group emails that were introducing everybody, that were giving general information, etc. Okay, fine. But then it became more and more often that this guy would start hitting me up like a few times a week, talking about the job, and this is how I know that he probably had some narcissistic qualities at best, maybe some ego or control issues. No, that's it. This man had some serious control issues. Anyway, I think he gathered that this was my first ever cruise contract, and I had never been on a ship before, never been away from home, never quite done a job like this before, and I think he purposely used that to F with me. This was a really aggressive dude. I remember he would call me and keep me on the phone for hours to quote unquote talk about the songs that and whatnot, and just maybe use it as a way to keep me on the phone. I don't know, to like maybe listen to himself talk. It was so weird. He would just say really unnecessary things and make inappropriate comments or just say things that never really needed to be said. And, first of all, I'm looking back thinking like, why did I put up with that? And I remember it was around the day like before I had to fly to Florida for the rehearsal process. And he straight up said to me, like, I guess he was trying to be funny, but he was like, "Are you overweight?" Like, long pause. And I'm like, okay. And I should have known that was like a precursor to, how his behavior began to be later on in the contract, because he would love to just say little things to trigger me or to shock me. And I didn't see this for the manipulation that it was at the time. And I've always been kind of a quiet, like sort of a timid and polite person. And back then it was so bad. I used to be kind of a reactive like person, but I think that sort of got shamed out of me over the years, and I just became kind of quiet and timid. And I want to get back to being that, not a hothead, but just a person that doesn't allow things to slide. The me now would tell people to F off, but back then I was just way too scared to say anything. So we completed the rehearsal process, which was okay, but I was struggling quite a bit because I hadn't been in hardly any situations where I had to read music or pay attention to charts and like sheet music charts. And this was the type of gig that, because you're working with so many musicians, it was very important to rely heavily on the sheet music. And because my training didn't exactly familiarize me with that or prepare me for that, I found myself struggling with a lot of that aspect, which looking back was probably very frustrating for the group. So I will own that. And I just want to say that even though this is a video about, my horrible experiences with less than, with subpar leadership, with subpar authority and bad bosses, I also want to say that I do see, looking back, because this was when I was much younger and I've matured a lot since then, I do see that where I could have done things differently. I do see where I had error, but I also am seeing the toxic environment and the toxic treatment for what it was. This is one of those situations where two things can be true at the same time. I could have been doing my job less than adequately, but also there was no reason for these bosses to treat me in the way that they did, especially in this case, the one I'm talking about now. I realized I was very new. I was probably very scared, and looking back, I was probably frustrating to work with, but that didn't help me be better. It only just hindered me. Like, it hindered me from my process. Okay, so I am able to understand what I was lacking as far as doing the job, but I'm also able to recognize the toxic work environment for what it was. So anyway, this man would terrorize everyone in the band. He called one of the guys out of his name during a gig, and he would yell and shout like during a song, like on stage. Imagine how unprofessional that is. Like who does that? And when it came to me, most of the abuse and trauma would derive from a few things. I would get yelled at and berated for not knowing when to come in on things, like on certain parts of the song. And the second thing was that I wasn't super comfortable with improvisation or talking, like doing banter in between songs. And I had really no experience with that. So when I would finish a song, even if I did the song perfectly, I was kind of awkward when it came to, I guess, like crowd interaction in between. So that was something that he would like yell at me about. And I had so many one-on-one talks with him. And I remember just being pulled into his office or whatever so many times, and him just telling me about how I'm not good enough to have this job, how he's pissed that the agency sent me to this ship, and all kinds of crazy stuff. I remember calling my dad and saying, I don't think I'm cut out for this. Like, I think I want to quit. And I got close to quitting so many times, you guys. And I had to deal with it for 6 months straight. So a 6-month contract was something that weighed on me for a long time. And my dad explained to me, he talked me off the ledge, and he explained essentially me quitting would be giving up my power and letting this guy win. I know that sounds cliche, but that's kind of what it would be. It's like, I would walk away and let this guy have the upper hand. He would go on to retire. Oh yeah, that was another thing. Another reason why he was probably so burned out and grumpy was because he had been working on the ships for like 10 years, and this was going to be that was his last contract. And so imagine, you have these newbies and you have these people and they're stressing you out. Not an excuse to treat them badly, but he was already, even if I'd like to say that even if I was the best singer ever, and I came into that situation like crushing it, he would still have a problem with me, So it's just one of those things. Like, he would have gone on and just lived his life, and that would reflect badly on me. I quit, and then I cut off that opportunity. I burned that bridge, and then I shoot myself in the foot. I don't have those opportunities anymore. It just didn't make sense for me. So my dad, he really convinced me, and that's kind of what turned it around. Over time, I did get better, and I learned how to grow a thick skin. I think that is a skill that you learn, especially as a woman, and especially as a female singer working around nothing but men, and especially at a time that was pre-Me Too, so men, and like pre-PC everything. So men would say all types of the craziest stuff and just get away with it. But the ability to work with the same material day after day, and not only was I comfortable with the material, like doing the same songs over and over, I became more comfortable with just being myself on stage, and I became comfortable with relaxing and talking to the audiences, and whatever I would say, it would just be a lot more natural, and I found myself not panicking as much. And that was the other thing. Side note, I think it was his last contract, so he wanted to, like, I don't know who he was trying to impress, or he was trying to make things interesting for himself. He didn't want to do a lot of the same songs over and over because he wanted to make sure he wouldn't get bored. But it's like everyone else in the band couldn't keep up with that. And so it was just like, oh my God, that was so frustrating. Looking back, I'm like, oh, that's why. It's like you gave us a repertoire of like 500 songs. It was like, you need to learn all of these, because he was sick of doing the same songs for 10 years. Whereas, a lot of us were just starting out, and we're like, we're just getting a handle on these songs. And he's like, too bad. You got to learn all this new stuff. It was just like freaking ridiculous. But looking back, like, I can't believe I put up with that. Like, it's just crazy. I became more comfortable, and I became more relaxed over time talking to the audiences, and whatever I would say would be a lot more natural. I found myself not panicking as much. Being that my background was more in theater and like musical theater, I was used to things being scripted and outlined, and I didn't have to creatively interact with the environment as much, if at all. And that was a skill I really sharpened during that time. By the end of my contract, I remember some of my bandmates saying, wow, you're really good now. You've really improved. And that was encouraging to me. I also remember that this was towards the end of my time with that group on that ship, that my band leader tried to talk crazy to me during a song. And this was while I was trying to interact with the audience. And he tried to do that thing where he wanted to get my attention or yell at me while I was talking or something. And I shut it down like mid-sentence. I think I said, like, he wanted to get my attention, like, oh, make sure you do this, and like right in front of people, which that's so unprofessional, by the way. Like, why would you even do that? That's ridiculous. Like, attention seeking much, but I embarrassed him right back. I turned around and I told him off right then and there in the moment, and everyone was like, whoa. It was one of those moments that people were like, whoa, my bandmates were like, way to go, girl. Like, who is this coming out, because I wasn't dealing with it anymore. I really had the tables turn for me towards the end of that contract. And I can see where the source of this particular supervisor's frustrations were. I know now, as an adult who has matured and come into more consciousness, who can also understand the psychology of people, especially negative people, narcissistic people, etc. And also, now that I have a better grasp on what the world of working on cruise ships is, I have a much better perspective. I can see now that a lot of his frustrations were because of the fact that I was such a newbie, and I was so green, and I was thrown into like this big girl job that I had not a lot of experience in, anything like that at the time. And I thought he was horribly abusive, which he was, and pretty much every single other member of the band thought so as well. So I know that I was justified in how I felt, and I knew he was wrong, but I also saw my own error, and by the end of that experience, I was able to turn it around and really learn from it. To this day, that experience helped me to become the confident performer that I am. And probably because I was traumatized, I went to the other extreme and I started practicing my banter. Like, I would write down things to say, like during shows, and that would really become one of my strongest skills as a performer as a result. It sucks that it had to happen that way, but as they say, pressure creates diamonds. So the other terrible supervisor story that I have is one with this one guy that was our band leader, but somehow he was buddy with the booker or the guy that selected musicians to put the bands together. So the guy that puts these bands together, I think he hand selects a lot of them, and then also a lot he gets audition submissions to him. And one of the people that I guess he selected for the bands ended up being my band leader. So these are two separate people, right? And this guy, this band leader that I had, he would always try to hang that over our head that he was buddy with the booker and like, oh, that's my friend and I've been handpicked and this and that. And he would always hang it over our heads like as a threat, I guess. But before we talk about him, let's talk about the booker, okay? This was a well-known thing with this particular music company. It was well known that they wanted the level of talent and the level of the musicians that they hired. They wanted it to be beyond amazing. They would always say that, we're looking for superstars. We want great musicians. Like, we're only choosing the best. Like, you would hear rumors circulating around the company that if you get to the rehearsal process, because you have to send in a video audition, like as a pre-screening, or you have to like know someone to be able to even get into the rehearsal process to get hired. And you get there and you fly yourself to the 2-week rehearsal process with the band, and they watch you like a hawk. Like, if this guy heard one note he didn't like, he has been known to fire people on the spot. And like, this knowledge was known throughout all the musicians that worked for them. So everyone was always like under this like scare. Like, everyone was always like scared their job was in jeopardy, which was like so funny and crazy looking back. It's like, calm down. But he got a reputation for being mean and scary and very strict on the musicians. So the band that I was placed in happened to be led by an individual that this mean and scary booker chose. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. So there's the booker who is in charge of all the bands, and then within my particular band, I had a supervisor / band leader who was also one of the musicians who was horrible to me. Okay, I'm just gonna go into it like that. Hopefully that makes sense. He was nice to me at first, as men are when they want to sleep with you. Of course, and then it just devolved into chaos over time. Have you guys ever been around, I'm specifically talking to my ladies, have you ladies ever been around a man who you almost feel like he hates you because either because he can't get with you, or like he's almost like jealous of you, like he wants to be you? Have you ever dealt with that before? It's so bizarre. It's like next level sassy behavior, and it's just a recipe for disaster, as it was in my case. Anyway, when we were in the rehearsal process and when we first got onto the ship, like, he would be nice to me. And I actually had a boyfriend at the time, but guys still try it. And I think I was being friendly with him. Like, we would go for coffee after work, like after shows or after rehearsals, and we would casually do things before and after work. And looking back, it was probably crossing a boundary. That's something I would never do now if I was in a relationship. Like, I would never just have a friendly relationship with a guy just because of this reason. I mean, I've learned my lesson. I'm not friends with men. I can count on 2 fingers, and I can't even think of the second one off the top of my head. Men that are just platonic, they're straight heterosexual men that are platonic, that have never tried anything with me. And one of them is a devout Muslim, and he's the best person I've ever met. So I literally cannot explain to you, I cannot give an example of a straight friendship with a man, because it just always ends up in disaster. Okay, let me stop digressing. Let me get back on topic. Okay, so, but my people pleasing was sort of out of control at the time, and I was probably just trying to be nice, trying to be cordial, whatever. Anyway, after some time, and I don't know if it was a particular incident that triggered this, or the fact that he realized that he was like, I was never going to sleep with him, and he realized he would never have a chance at messing around with me, he started to get really mean, and I believe that he retaliated against me. He started by being extremely nasty and critical, nitpicking and micromanaging every single thing about me and about my performance, telling me everything I would do is wrong or sounds bad, and it got really, really ugly. I blocked a lot of it out, you guys, because to be honest, it was a very tumultuous time. It was very traumatic. I was so anxious, stressed, depressed at one point. It was another moment where I contemplated quitting that job, and it was another time where I had to talk to my dad, and he talked me off the ledge once again. It was almost like this guy was like taking his anger and his frustrations out on me. And it got to the point where others in the band would notice, and they would say it to me, like, we see how you're treating her unfairly. Not that they ever stood up for me, but they would, because they were probably scared of losing their jobs too, because this guy would act like he was holding it over our heads, like, oh, I can get you fired and this and that. Like, so we never felt like we had a way to like be empowered over it. And so they would notice, the other guys in the band would notice, and that's how you know it's bad. Like, oh, you're treating, like, he treats you really bad, and, you know, he's going out of his way to be an asshole to you. And I remember we would have rehearsals on board, and this guy would say things like, alluding as if to say, like, oh, I'm going to tell on you to this booker, and, you know, the one I told you about before. It was like he would try to make us feel like our jobs were being threatened and they're in jeopardy, and that he had the power to get us fired because he was so buddy with that dude. And it frustrated me a lot at the time. But looking back, I could see through that foolery. Like, I could have called his bluff so fast. If that were me now, like, hindsight is so 2020, but growth is real because I am a totally different person now. Anyway, that experience, though parts of it were truly horrible, I feel like I grew a lot, and I actually ended up triumphing because that was during the time when I was working really hard to pitch my own guest entertainer show to the cruise lines. And during a time, I think even that day, I had gotten berated by this dude about how it was literally that day I had gotten like yelled at by that guy, my band leader, about how I did something wrong and how my performance was lacking and this and that. And I remember after that very hard set, I went back to my room, and that was the day that I got that email with an offer from an agency to pick up my guest entertainer show. So I put up with his BS, and it was not easy because I still had 3 months left in my contract at that point to work with him. And I still struggled a lot, but knowing that I had a new opportunity waiting for me on the other end of it, and knowing that I was about to elevate so far above this dude, and like, that's what kept me going. Like, bro, if you were jealous of me before, like, prepare to be effing sick of me now. And I'm glad I went through that, because I know when someone is trying to tell me something that isn't true about myself, and I now understand that, you know, hating me, that's a you problem, okay? And there's nothing wrong with me. I'm not perfect. I'm not above correcting my mistakes when they happen, but that experience opened my eyes to my true power and my true confidence, and not believing the lies that people tell about you or the narratives that they want to put on you based on their own BS and their own insecurities. Like, oh, you think I'm so horrible, I'm bringing down the band and no one likes me and I suck and this and that. Oh yeah, is that why people are coming here every night to ask to take pictures with me and tell me how amazing I am, asking me to sing longer? Is that why I just got an offer to do my own solo show on ships and, you know, just keep elevating above you? What did you get? You know, not to be funny, but my career has grown by leaps and bounds since then, and his has literally stayed stagnant. So he's doing the same thing that he was literally then when he was sitting up there spending time hating on me and spreading lies and spreading hatefulness and negativity towards me. And what am I doing? Living my life, you know, doing all that, all behind a piece of ass because I wouldn't give him a piece of ass. Like, that is so pathetic. Men, you really got to get your emotions in check when it comes to this workplace thing. Like, it's okay for a beautiful woman to exist and for you to have nothing to do with it, okay? Leave her alone. And even to the last day, this man was worried about me and making jokes and mocking things in my relationship. For example, when I would get mail from my boyfriend at the time for Christmas, he would make stupid, weird, dumb jokes. Like, bro, it's so obvious you're a hater. And it's disheartening that a man can retaliate against you simply because you won't sleep with him. That's crazy. Why must we put up with that as women? Like, that's a whole different video and a different story for another day. But anyway, have you ever experienced anything like this as a performer? Have you ever dealt with horrible bosses or supervisors? How did you cope? Leave me some of your thoughts and comments and experiences down below. I would love to hear if my story sounds similar to anyone else's out there. Anyway, make sure that you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so that you never miss an upload. Also, follow me on Instagram, and if you're a singer interested in coaching or mentoring, check out the link in my description box and join my full-time singer program and other courses. Thanks so much, and I will catch up with you guys in the next one.